What is going on, Summit Chasers out there? I hope you're having a great evening. Cheers to you. I'm having a little bit of I'm having some Maker's Mark bourbon tonight uh, because we're talking about stress and the effects of stress tonight. So here's one way you can de-stress. Obviously, do it responsibly and not very often. But cheers to everybody. Today we have a good one. Like we said, we're going to talk about stress. And what I want to say first is this isn't going to be a talk on. It is actually going to be a talk on how bad stress can be, but it's not going to be a talk on how important it is to get rid of stress altogether, to completely avoid it, to completely eliminate it from your life. Because that's if you're on here, you're somebody who's a high performer. You want to achieve some amazing things, and with that comes stress. It's just the way it is. You're going to be stressed. And it was funny. I saw as I was kind of getting ready for this live today, and I was putting together some slides and that kind of stuff. I saw a post from Alex Ramosi, and he was saying like stress is inevitable. Just kind of deal with it. Like just get over that. It's part of it, and deal with it. It's just what kind of stress do you want to choose? Do you want to choose, life stress? Do you want to not life stress? Do you want to choose failure stress or achievement success, or like hustle stress? Like what kind of stress do you want to achieve? It's interesting him giving perspective on stress, just because, I don't know how old he is, 35 or something like that, maybe even younger than that, no kids. And maybe he's probably hard up on money for like 3 months out of his life. So it's just interesting his perspective on stress, which I love Alex and everything that he does and that kind of stuff. But to say that everybody's stress is the same and what makes them stressed and how they should be dealing with it is the same is kind of ludicrous. But I love black and white statements on old LinkedIn. But anyways, we're going to talk about kind of how you can recognize some of the negative effects of stress that stress can have on you, and how it really makes you kind of fall back onto your most primitive, I want to say primitive, but your most basic, your most baseline habits, your most baseline thought processes. And it really, there's the saying, you don't rise to the occasion, you fall to the level of your preparation, which is, I think, it's very accurate. I think what would be more accurate is you don't rise to the level of the occasion, you fall to the level of your habits, of your current habits, your mental habits and biases. Because a lot of times when you're making decisions, especially when you're making decisions under stress, and we talked about this last week, we fall victim to a lot of our biases, and one bias being the availability bias. And when we're stressed, we only pull what's most available to us. Actually, I should be going this way, our brain to our mouth. And a lot of times it falls back to like past experiences, things that we've done over and over and over again for years and years and years. And sometimes those things aren't innately good, or they're our most, very subconscious ways of thinking. In some ways, it's very, very primitive. But since we are talking about stress today, let's all get on the same page. Oh, actually, first of all, what am I doing? I'm missing announcements. Sign up for the Young Professionals Leadership Summit. How's that for a promo? Just do it. Go to yplsummit.com. Sign up October 19th, Young Professionals Leadership Summit. We have in-person tickets and virtual tickets. Like I say this every time, it's shaping up to be an absolutely amazing event. You can go see some of my LinkedIn posts about it. Come and meet some of the, if you go to yplsummit.com, you can meet some of the speakers. I've done some interviews with them. So if you go to our YouTube channel as well, you'll see a lot of our interviews that we did with the speakers. Incredible event. Again, it's only $60 for tickets in person, $20 for virtual. So just don't have coffee for a few days and you'll be covered. So make sure you sign up there, and make sure you show up to our Summit Coffee Club this week. We're going to be with Edgar Brom. His podcast is coming out tomorrow. He is a valuation expert, small business valuation expert, and we're going to be playing valuation bingo. So that one's going to be very fun. So show up Saturday mornings at 11 a.m. Eastern. This one's going to be a lot of fun. And we have a couple new guests that I just lined up for coming weeks that I'm very excited about. We're going to have a lot of fun. I also found some really fun games to play. So I'm excited about the games. So make sure you show up to that one. So we'll see you there. Get your tickets. Let's get started. So like I said, we're talking about stress, but let's get on the same page as far as like what stress actually is. And I'd be really interested to see what what different people's definition of what stress is in the comments. Again, I know there's some lag But go ahead. I don't care if it's 20 minutes into the thing. Type it in. What do you feel stress? Like, define stress. What is stress for you? What does it mean to you? Because I feel like it'd be different for everybody. Because what stresses some people out is very different than what stresses other people out. Some people do really well in chaos. I'm kind of like that, where I do well in chaos, like loud rooms and that kind of stuff. I do okay. It doesn't bug me too much as long as I know where an exit is. And then some people, that is like their worst nightmare. That stresses them out so much, and they don't know how to deal with it. So what your definition, everyone's definition of what stress is and how it affects them is going to be very different. But I'm going to give you initially a very basic idea of what a definition of what stress is. And it's just a primitive response to threats. That's all it is. It's just, what do you perceive as a threat? That's the thing that is really differentiated from person to person, from environment to environment, and upbringing to upbringing even, right? So what do you perceive as a threat? Now, I know there's going to be some people on here that want to, here we go. Adrena, stress to me, I'd say mainly instability. Yeah, we know that. We know that for sure. And that, again, some people thrive under kind of the unknown, they see the light at the end of the tunnel, but they don't know how far it is. They don't know if the train's coming. They don't know all this kind of stuff, but they're ready to run into it, sort of thing. Oh, here's another one. John, confrontation is a instant stressor to me. Strong disagreement. That is a big one. You know what? That's a strong sign of, John, is that you have empathy. People who are strong with empathy do not do well with confrontation. They don't do well with giving bad news because they can feel it. They instantly know before they even say it what this other person's going to feel, and then they feel it before they even say it, if that makes any sense whatsoever. But I appreciate you too jumping in big time. Yeah, and those are, for some people, that just doesn't stress them out. That's just part of it's just part of who they are, and they're okay with it, right? And not being okay with it comes with different strengths. And I feel like if you can find somebody who has that strong empathy, who's not great with confrontation, and you can pair them with somebody who is, you form a great team. You form a great team. So we would be a great team, John. We would absolutely be a great team. Beautiful, John. I'm glad that makes sense. Sometimes I say stuff and I'm like, I don't know if that came across right. But I know that there's some people on here who want a more refined definition of what stress really is. So let's talk about where stress actually comes from. It comes from the fear center of our brain, also known as the amygdala. It's part of the limbic system, also known as like our subconscious, which is responsible for controlling emotions, behavior, and memory formation. And it is most active when we are stressed. So that's why, so look at that last part, and memory formation, memory formation, right? So when we have the very strong stress invoking scenarios, this is where PTSD comes from. Those memories are formed, they get seared into our brain a lot of times. Like we can't unsee them for a very long time, or we completely erase them. Absolutely completely erase them. Most of the time they get seared in our head. We can't stop thinking of it. It becomes almost a movie that is clear as day that plays in our head when those really high stress moments happen. They get seared in your head. And it triggers the hypothalamus, and that releases the stress hormone. So you have your adrenaline and cortisol. Too much of each of those for too long, it can really break your body down. And we'll go more into that in a little bit. And it's interesting that something so small can have such a big impact on how we make decisions, who we are, how it affects our outward being, our language, all this kind of stuff. It's just that little red dot. I don't know why I'm hovering over it. You can't see my mouse, but that little red dot, that's the amygdala. And that has that much control over us. It's the size of a peanut. And there's actually two halves to it. And both our right and our left hemisphere have each half of it. So there's two halves that are in their head, but it's very, very small, the size of a peanut. Oh, here we go. Ray, thanks for joining, my friend. He's going to be on the coffee club here pretty soon. My life is already controlled chaos by design. What stresses me out are things that are out of my control, like kiddos or wife being sick or in pain. And we're going to talk through that. Absolutely. The feeling of things being out of our control. Because nobody likes feeling that the next steps that you take are not up to you where your feet land. No one wants to have that feeling. So that is a very great share, Mr. Ray. I really appreciate that. And I'm very excited to have you on the Summit Coffee Club, my friend. He was actually on, we were on each other's podcast. So go check him out on the Summit Chasers podcast. He's a great human being. He's the one. So there's a lot of people you see on LinkedIn that have like the chief happiness officer on their LinkedIn profile as like that's their role. He's the only one that I believe. Like he's my chief happiness officer. He's one of my chief happiness officers. So very excited to have you back on, Ray, and thank you for being here. Anyways, where were we? Back to stress. So our response to stress, right? And obviously it's written out there too. It's highly involved in processing anger and anxiety. And this anxiety can make you do one of two things. And the anger makes you do one. And we've all heard these before, the 3 Fs, right? Fight, flight, or freeze. Right? And how that looks these days is a lot different than it did back in the day when our stress response was in charge of keeping us alive. It was part of our survival. It's something that we evolved into, or that evolved into our biology a long time ago, because it kept us safe from predators. If you're running through the forest and you have a saber-toothed tiger chasing after you, it helps you run faster, run longer, and make really quick, short-sighted decisions. Should I go left up the tree or right over the waterfall? Cats don't like water, so I'm going to jump over the waterfall. Very short-sighted decisions. Hunger and food, survival, getting food, gathering food, overcoming the odds, right? When you're hungry, you have that stress response. When you're hungry, you're starving, that adrenaline gets released. You have a little bit more energy now to keep going, to whether it's gather more food or hunt down the prey that you're trying to hunt. But that was a big thing that invoked the stress response back in the day, and why that stress response was developed. Status. We are tribal creatures. We're very tribal creatures. So when we're always vying over the millennia, we've always vying for increasing our status in our tribe. If we increase our status, that means we got more food, we got better choice of mates, so we're more likely that we're going to pass on our genetics, and we were safer. We got a better spot next to the campfire, right? We got maybe pushed more inner circle in the community, so we were less at risk of predators on the outskirts of the tribe. So status was something that was a huge stress. Now this aspect of what we valued so much back when the stress response was still very useful, this hasn't really changed. We still value our status highly. It just looks a little bit differently. And the things that stress us out today look a little bit differently, and not just in kind, but in abundance. There's so much out there that stresses us out right now, just because we have so much more information. There's so much more coming at us. We have so much more opportunity to be stressed, right? So let's look at kind of some of the differences. So like, what stresses us out today? Again, status in your community, in your social circles. You're in a social circle, you have a bunch of friends, or you're in your business, or maybe you're at your job, and everybody has they make more money than you, or they have more followers than you, right? You perceive your status as a little bit lower, therefore it heightens your stress because you want to climb that status ladder, right? Even though these days a lot of status, of what we claim to be status metrics, or vanity metrics, they don't innately mean that we're less viable to succeed. Right? These are just vanity metrics, but they do stress us out. Another example is your DoorDash driver being late. I don't know why I put that one so high up on the list, but that used to stress me out. Nobody wants a cold burrito. Losing your job, right? Even if you have a stable job, you start hearing the news, there's layoffs, right? You start getting stressed about losing your job, even though you're very comfortable where you are. Car troubles, transportation, right? The world's a big place. If you can't get around, all of a sudden your world shrinks and you feel like you lose status. Politics, it's everywhere. Politics is vying one person against the next. It's just everybody's against each other. Politics is a huge stress, and they do it on purpose. They want to stress you out. TV shows. What was I watching? I was watching the new Lord of the Rings. I'm a nerd. A lot of you probably already know that if you've watched some of these shows. But I'm a huge nerd. I was watching the Lord of the Rings show. It was like 10 o'clock at night. And I'm not going to, no spoilers here, but it's like season 2 of the Rings of Power. And I was so stressed out because I'm a big fan. I know kind of the lore of where it leads up to and that kind of stuff. I was stressed. Even TV shows stress you out today. Financial issues. All the time it stresses you out. Inflation. All these things stress you out. What happens? You're always thinking in your head, what if I don't have money? What if I lost my job? What if I didn't have money? What would happen? I put so much weight on that as well. And then the news, international news, wars that are going on all over the place. And yes, I had to put another slide up because there's so many things that stress us out today. Your dog peed on the rug, or you wake up to the sound of your dog throwing up. Everyone knows there's that joke, that running joke, that the sound of your dog throwing up, no one gets out of bed quicker than that. That stresses you out. Your Uber driver being late now. You lost your phone for 2 minutes because God forbid you don't have your iPhone on you for 2 minutes so you can check your Instagram account. You lost your phone charger. That's a big one because then you just don't have your phone. You have to spend $30 to get another one. And then I put politics and money in there again because they're such a huge stress. Now, those are kind of your regular day-to-day. Those are some examples of things that stress you out today. And even you could see in the comments, there's a few people that even gave more examples of things that stress you out. Confrontation, the fear of losing control over your future. Even though, like, back in the day, we never thought of that, right? We didn't even think of we're just looking to survive, right? The fact that I even might get to see tomorrow is a win. We think, like, what am I going to do 10 years from now? What if my kids don't have college funds in 15 years? Like the fear of the unknown stresses us out so much more, right? So there's probably a way bigger list than this, right? And if anybody else wants to, anybody else who's here, you can vent. Just put in the chat what stresses you out, and then we can talk it through. But we're here to talk more some of the things as a business owner, as a leader in a business, that stress you out. And then we're going to talk through some of the things some of the negative side effects of some of these stress responses, right? So as a business owner, too many priorities. So you have a lack of focus and direction. If you have too many priorities, you might as well have none, right? If you're focusing on 10 things, you're actually focusing on nothing. There's a million quotes. If you go on LinkedIn, I'm sure you could scroll far enough and you will see quotes on why focusing on too many things is bad. Right. But if you focus on too many things, you get nothing done. And I'm sure a lot of people here who are listening to this now, and if you have some examples of this, or if you do agree with this, let me know. You're running a business. You're putting out fires all day. You're busy. You were moving nonstop, or at least you were doing things nonstop. You're busy. Just this busy work. And you get home for the end of the day. You want to de-stress. So maybe you have a glass of Maker's Mark. And you sit back and you're like, I was busy all day, but I don't feel like I accomplished anything. I don't feel like I innately moved myself forward towards my goal, but I was nonstop busy. How stressful is that? That is incredibly stressful. Doing so much, running on this hamster wheel, and then looking around and realizing I haven't gone anywhere. That is incredibly stressful. And I've been there many times. Lack of support, people, loneliness. Not lack of loneliness, but maybe an abundance of loneliness. Like I was saying before, we are tribal creatures. Whether we want to believe it or not. Yes, some people might like their alone time, but innately we are tribal creatures. We operate best when we are giving back to a community that is giving back to us. And when we feel like we don't have that, when we feel like an outcast, when we feel alone, we feel at risk. We feel vulnerable. That's when that anxiety starts to creep in, right? That's not the only thing that causes anxiety. I'm not going to say that I'm an expert on anxiety. However, that is a big thing. Feeling vulnerable, feeling like you don't have anybody. And as a business owner, it can feel incredibly lonely. Absolutely incredibly lonely. Even if you have a big team, maybe you feel like as a business owner, actually even John gave this as an example, realization that a bad hire, that he made a bad hire, right? That's a big issue. So now he's feeling like, okay, I have this team, but they're not what I need. They're not helping. They're not pushing the business forward. Now I feel like everything's back on my shoulders. I actually feel it even more so because now dealing with this bad hire is also on your shoulders. You feel even more alone. And as an owner too, there's at a point you realize these people that you hired are not innately your friends, right? They're not your friends. You're their boss. And that's not a good feeling. You don't want to have that feeling. You want people on your team that you feel like you're partnered with. Feel like you're all rowing the boat in the same direction, right? And then some people too, if you're somebody who, you started a business, maybe took a loan out and you're starting to, you're kind of at that dip just before the business takes off. You're kind of at the bottom of that dip. and your family is like, when is this going to take off? When is this going to? Why don't you just go get your old job back? Or your parents are like, you do what for a living? My parents ask me that every day. What do you guys do? Although they do support me greatly, but that feeling of lack of support, that's a huge stressor. And lack of a clear plan, like Ray was talking about, fear of the unknown, lack of control. We do not like not knowing what that next step is. And there's actually a study done on this with individuals who they got diagnosed with cancer, right? And it was just a very broad, they got very broadly diagnosed. You have lung cancer, you have thyroid cancer, you got whatever cancer. And before they took readings, because you can do blood panels and you can do like heart rate tests and blood pressure tests and this kind of stuff, sleep tests, to see how stress is affecting you. And they took baseline tests on these individuals after they got the diagnosis of cancer, and their stress readings went through the roof, absolutely through the roof. Then they measured them again after they met with their doctor, and they got a plan in place. Even if the plan didn't have a guaranteed clear positive outcome, the stress markers decreased significantly. I don't remember the numbers, so I don't want to put my foot in my mouth, but I know that they decreased significantly. Even if the plan didn't have a clear guaranteed positive outcome. But because they had a plan, because they had somewhat control over their outcome, over their life, over what they could do to possibly help the situation to move forward, their stress went down. So having a clear plan, a lot of business owners do not have a clear plan. They have a wish list. I just did a live about the difference between wish lists and strategies on Tuesday. So go watch the replay, right? It's on Summit Chaser Production YouTube channel. But having a clear plan decreases, it's a huge decrease in stress, and it helps with clarity, obviously, but also helps with your mood. It helps how you deal with people. It helps so much. Right? And then our basic needs being threatened. It's like our home, our family. Like, go back to the scenario. You're just in that dip before the business takes off, right? You're stressed because the roof over your head, your family is at risk. Your comfort, the things that you have fought so hard up until this point to get, are at risk. Your health is at risk. Relationships are at risk. When your basic needs are not met, it's really hard for you to make good decisions. It's really hard for you to be creative, to get yourself out of these situations, and that causes a huge stress response. Now, we talked about these your stress responses being those three, right? The primitive stress responses, anyways, the fight, flight, or freeze. Now, let's put those into a context, a more current context of how that fight, flight, or freeze, those reactions, right, can negatively affect your business, how you perform. Again, it doesn't have to, not even if you're not a business owner, if you just work for a business, if you're a leader, if you're trying to be somebody who's influential, if you have a family, if you have relationships, a network, how do these negatively affect those things? So fight. Problem seems much larger than they really are. We've all been there when we're a little snappy, right? We're stressed. We've been working long hours, right? Somebody comes to you with a very simple problem, right? And you just snap. You immediately go to the worst case scenario in your head, or you immediately just shut it down. Everyone's been there before. It happens, right? But that's that fight response, right? Blood flows to external extremities when you're stressed, right? And you're in this, if your natural response is to fight, blood flows to external extremities and away from the brain. So that means you can't be as creative because it's flowing away from the part of your brain that allows you to be intentional and creative, and goes to your external extremities. So again, back in the day, we were trying to run away from cats. We don't do that as much anymore, although cats are pretty crazy around here in farm towns, but we're not running away from predators all the time anymore. Right. So our response is still, again, we're not that physiologically evolved. We are, our technology might be more evolved, but physiologically and biologically, we're not that evolved. So blood flows to the extremities, so you can run faster, jump higher. You're stronger. Your pain sensories are a little bit dulled, right? Everyone's, you've seen, whether it's stories or whatever it is, somebody gets hurt really, really bad and they can't even feel it. You go into shock, right? You call it shock. It's fairly similar. It's hard. It's hard for you to feel pain, right? Whether if anybody here's been in a fight before, I used to fight for a living, and I would get out of the ring and I'd have all these bruises and cuts. Like I didn't even know that happened, right? Just because it dulls it, right? When you're stressed and you have that stress response, adrenaline's released, you don't feel as much, right? And that narrows your focus. So again, creativity is lowered, big picture thinking is lowered, and short-sighted decisions are made. So we talked about that before. When you run away from the cat, you have two choices: either run up the tree or over the cliff into the river. Choose the river. When we're making short-sighted decisions, that's what we call first level consequences. You're only worried about the first level consequences. So what is happening right now, right? But there's two or three other levels of consequences that you have to look at, right? And when you're stressed, it's hard for you to look at those other levels of consequences. So I'll give you an example. When we're stressed, everyone says like you stress eating. Everyone's heard that before. You stress eat. Well, the first level consequence is I want something that tastes good right now so I can make myself feel better right now. So that's the first level consequence that I'm looking at. Second level consequence is I don't really feel that great, right? I ate way too much McDonald's or A&W or whatever your splurge of choice is, and now I don't feel good. So that's level 2 consequence. Now I do that, I repeat that cycle enough, we see level 3 consequences, which is my health starts to deteriorate. I'm going to the doctor, my blood pressure is high, and the doctor's like, you need to lose weight and get healthier or go on blood pressure medication. Your cognitive function is decreasing because you're not putting good nutrition in your body. Those are second and third level consequences. And when we're stressed, we tend to ignore the second and third level consequences. And this also increases the process of anger and anxiety. So you have lowered empathy and patience. So put yourself, if you're a leader and you're constantly stressed and you have a lowered level of empathy and patience, you're going to make much more short-sighted people decisions. And some people listening to this are like, I make it easy and just fire them. That's that level 1 consequence that you're focusing on, not the 2 or 3. But as a leader, do you want to constantly be in a lowered state of empathy and patience? Or do you want to be able to regulate that appropriately? When you're stressed, it's much harder to regulate that response appropriately. You always shoot for more immediate reactions. You don't want to be in that. You don't want to be constantly in that state. And John, cats still scare me. One of them taking a bite out of backside is a recurring nightmare for me. Was that something that happened and then you have a recurring nightmare, or is it just a random nightmare that you've always had? I gotta know. Thanks for jumping in. Next is after fight, flight. So risk aversion is much higher. When we're stressed, that's a big bias of ours as human beings. The risk aversion bias. So there were studies done. I can't remember who did it. I can't remember who did the study. I actually just saw this on a podcast not too long ago, where the equation of us losing something to us needing to gain it back is threefold. So let's say we lost $10. In order for us to feel equal to how we felt when we had the $10, we'd actually have to gain $20 or $30. Because our pain of losing what we already had is so much higher than gaining, or just getting it back, or just breaking even. And when you're stressed, risk is much higher. So we just don't want to lose. And again, this goes back to that primitive response. When I'm stressed, I got to hold on to everything. I got to protect everything I currently have. So you're less likely to make outside the box creative decisions, which in this day and age you have to have, with how fast technology is moving, how fast some of these industries are changing. You have to be able to make some risks. You have to be able to take some risks, and you have to be able to be creative. But if your risk aversion is so high because you're so stressed, you're much less likely to make those decisions. And then again, pain receptors are dulled and long-term memory is clouded. Again, you can run longer. You just run away from your problems. And then because of risk aversion, you're more prone to avoid issues. So you're more prone to procrastinate. You're going to run away from things. You're going to want to run away from your problems. I don't want to deal with that right now. I'm just going to ignore it and hope it goes away. That's running away. That's flight. And then you prioritize activities that provide quick dopamine hits. So this is another form of escapism. And this is where you see a lot of this reaction is very similar to what you see in drug addicts. Very similar. They have issues, they have problems, they get stressed out, they avoid it and run away by using drugs. And I can say that because I've been there before. But that's a form of flight, is you just avoid things instead of facing them head on and solving the problem long term. Next is freeze. And again, because of risk aversion, you're more likely to prefer to do nothing over the possibility of failing. So this is like that analysis paralysis type of thing, right? This is where a lot of people who say that they're perfectionists, they're really just freezing up. They don't want to take a risk, right? They prefer to do nothing, right? Decisions take way longer, and then you miss opportunities. Decisions taking the ability to make decisions, your decision-making process, in your decision-making process, the time of which you have to make the decision is just as important sometimes as the decision itself. And if you're under stress, then this is your response, is to freeze. You're much more likely to take much longer to make those decisions, and then thus you're missing opportunities. And then there's another factor, and I kept the same picture in here for some reason, but it's the effects that long-term stress has on your health. It can increase your resting heart rate and blood pressure, which can cause, you're more likely at risk of aneurysms and strokes, right? Fat stores around the midsection and organs. So that is actually us trying to protect ourselves, right? When we're stressed, again, our bodies think like, oh, we're under attack constantly, or we've hit some sort of famine, or there was some sort of calamity. So we need to store fat as much as possible. So we store fat around our organs, which that happens long enough, very, very bad for you. Visceral fat is very, very bad for you. That's why I see some people that look healthy on the outside. If you were to look inside, some of them aren't very, because their kidneys and all this, their liver has fat around it, and they just don't operate as well. They're usually under a lot of stress. They have higher cortisol levels, right? And then you have poor sleep. Because of the poor sleep, you have decreased cognitive function. And then with the especially the increased longevity of time that you're having cortisol injected into your system and adrenaline, you break down the muscle tissue, because your body needs the protein, because your body's just storing the fat. Your body's storing this, so the food that you're taking in, your body's just storing it. So then your body, in order to get this energy, right, it's more likely to start breaking down muscle tissue. So then your joints start to hurt. You start to lose strength, right? You're going to have more long-term issues when you're older, especially in your hips and that kind of stuff. But again, I wanted to say, at the beginning, I said, like, I'm not just going to be ripping on how stress is so bad and it should be something that's avoided all the time. It should be mitigated. But stress can also be a tool. You just have to know when to lean into it and when to lean away from it. Stress can be a big tool. When you're focused on something, right, and you have the plan, right, you're clear on the plan, you're clear on the direction you want to go. Now it's just time to execute. Stress can be a good tool to get you into the flow state. It can be a good tool to motivate you to do something. Stress isn't innately a bad thing. Again, it was used to keep us alive for a very long time, and it can still be used to help us move forward. It's just knowing when to mitigate it, identifying when you need to mitigate the effects of the stress, and when to lean into it. Because it can't be avoided, but it can be mitigated. Now, here's some ways to decrease, the side effects of the stress. And I talked about this last week, right? Awareness plus understanding with attention. And that was when you identify certain biases that you have. But it's the same thing with stress. We have a client still, and she's an HR, strategic HR partner, and she had to make they sent her to an office. She had to she had to build up this office, and she was hiring really, really quickly. She had to make some strategic decisions. And she noticed that when she was stressed, she was making really quick, poor, strategic, long-term thinking decisions. And so she identified that, okay, when somebody comes into my office, or if I have an interview on my calendar, I need to, we say, like, create space. Create space between where you are at currently and the decision that needs to be made. You create space. So she knew, okay, if I'm stressed out, or I had a really, really busy day, or something didn't go my way, or whatever it is, I knew I needed 5 minutes. I needed 5 minutes to go have a walk, drink my tea, and I needed to kind of get myself back down to as close to homeostasis as possible. So it's being aware of When is it okay to utilize some of these stress? Like if I need to motivate myself to go work out, or if I need to motivate myself when I used to do cold calling when I was doing a lot of sales, I needed to motivate myself to get those first few calls out of the way. And utilizing stress for that type of stuff is good. It's fine. You can use it. It helps you get out of what you're currently doing, right? Stress can be a sign to do something different, to create something different. Exercise, nutrition, exercising well. We're animals. Human beings are, we get angst, right? And letting that out is really, really important. And we try to rationalize it with, with something else. Like I'm just have anxiety or just have this or whatever it is. Exercising is one of the biggest, and the difference for me too, when I do exercise and when I don't exercise, and my ability to deal with stress and mitigate the effects of stress is gigantic. Absolutely gigantic. The key is not to make exercising another stress, or the fact that you're not exercising a stress, or the fact that you're a little sore a stress. It's just part of it. But exercising and taking care of yourself is huge on mitigating the negative effects of stress itself. Breathing meditation are super important. And this is where the next one comes in. This is what I call prioritize your creative time. So this comes from a concept that Bill Gates, and he would take a week. I don't know if it was every quarter or every 6 months, or maybe it might have been every year, but he took a week or 10 days to just go somewhere where he was not being bothered with emails and people asking questions and the riffraff of the corporate world. And he would just go and he would read, study, and be creative. He would do his breathing exercises. He would meditate. You have to take time to prioritize your creative time. And that, again, that involves a lot of the breathing and meditation, and really that creative, get rid of the stress, do something for yourself, fill up your own cup. And you can look to your inner circle. Look at your inner circle. Are they a net positive or negative? Do they fill your cup or do they empty your cup? Because what's worse than, I had a stressful day at the office, or had a stressful day at work, the business is blah, 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 blah. And you go out with your friends, or you go to try to, bounce some ideas off of them, explain your situation or whatever it is, and they just pull you down. That's just so much worse, because now you just feel like you're in this, again, this hamster wheel of, I can't escape. I'm lonely. This makes more stress. So look at your inner circle. Are they helping you, lifting you up? Or are they emptying your cup? And then create wins for yourself. And I'm not talking about participation trophies. Like, don't just be like, oh, I got out of bed this morning, so we're doing good. I don't mean like that. I mean, create wins for yourself. Like going to the gym. Any day that I get a good workout in, that is a win. I get a win. I wake up, and a lot of times the first thing I do is I read. That is a win. I'm pouring into my own cup. I make sure, like, create activities for yourself that we call them like the lead measures. Create lead measures for yourself. We did this many reach outs today, appropriate reach outs, following a system that works. That was a win. Create those wins for yourself. I got the dogs out. I took care of myself today. But again, don't like turn something that you normally do just by surviving and turn that into your win. It's not a participation trophy, right? And then focus on the most important initiatives, not 100 of them. Find what those one or two things are that are going to help you move forward and accomplish those. Don't focus on a million things. Because again, if you focus on a million things, you're just not going to get anything done. If you focus on a million, you're focusing on none. If you focus on 10, you're focusing on none. So narrow your focus as much as you can. And in order to do that, some of that is going to mean you're going to have to delegate. Set your business up, set your life up, again, even if you're just a manager or a director or something at work, delegate, set up systems, train people, create processes, utilize software to be able to delegate. Set it up to be able to delegate. When you see a lot of it, you have to be able to delegate to be successful. Don't just start like, okay, I'll do that, and just throw all your work on somebody or something. You have to set them up, because then set them up for success, because the worst thing is you delegate to somebody, they fail, and then you have to take it over anyways, and then you don't trust anybody to delegate to in the future, and then it's just this whole, again, you're on another hamster wheel. Set up the systems to be able to delegate, and then actually fucking delegate. A lot of people won't. You want to hold on to it. You feel like you own it. I mean, if you're a founder, I guess technically you do, but you don't have to. You don't have to. Focus on the highest priority, the highest value activities, the one or two activities that will get you the most return on your investment. And again, this wasn't supposed to be like I'm hating, not like just no one's supposed to be stressed out. It is not a thing. The most successful people are never stressed. It's not the thing. It's just recognizing when it's doing you a disservice and recognizing when you can use it for you, when you can use it as an advantage. That's it. And then recognizing too how some of these stresses they can affect your decision making. That's the biggest thing when you're a business owner or a leader. It's how you make decisions is one of the biggest aspects or biggest differences between being successful and not being successful. So you want to set yourself up. You want to increase the chances. You want to increase the odds as much as possible that you're going to make more good decisions than not. And identifying some habits that you have, especially when those habits are accentuated by stress, identifying those, understanding some strategies in order to overcome them and mitigate them could be the difference between you having an amazing year and you staying where you're at. Could be a huge, huge difference between those two. But for those of you that showed up, I really, really appreciate you. Adrena committed to adding meditation to my daily routine. It started this morning. Really? You meditated? I'm jealous. That's awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. But I want to appreciate everybody for being here. If you're watching this afterwards, still comment. I want to see some of your what makes you stressed out. Well, I don't want to see that, but I want you. You're just a safe place. You can get involved in the conversation. Let us know what stresses you out, and then if there's anything that we can help you with, we're always here for you. We want to. This is a lot of what we do with our clients, with our founder clients. Is again, it starts with you, and that's why we did this. We started this show, this live, is because it truly does start with you. And some of these things that could be the difference. Genuinely could be the difference. If you make one or two better decisions a month, a year, that could be the difference between your business blowing up and it staying the same, or even worse, crumbling and not being there anymore. So wouldn't you want to do everything you can to increase the odds as much as possible that you're making the right decisions more often? I hope the answer is yes. But again, thank you everybody for being here. I had a blast. And until next time, keep chasing your next summit.